One of the biggest things that makes a game even better is for it to be personally meaningful. But don't take my word for it, take yours. After all, you're the one who the game is personally meaningful to. These are the types of games that are not only enjoyable to play, but often provide us with a sense of comfort. The type of games that allow you to really be yourself. They just get you. When you talk about these games, it often comes with a story instead of just, yeah, I played the game and it was good. Not that anything's wrong with that, but games that have personal meaning for you have likely played a key role in why you have the kind of passion for the hobby that you do, and perhaps even changed the way you think about video games as a whole. Powerful stuff. It's not uncommon for a gamer to be able to point to a specific game and say, yep, that's the game that made me say, I think I'll be playing video games forever, which, fittingly enough, is often just whatever the very first game you played was. But whether or not it was the very first game you ever played, these games are bigger than the world of video games. They're games that made you realize a world without video games is hardly a world to live in at all. Having a better video game experience is nice, sure, but having a better life is, well, even better. I always find the stories people have about video games that connect to their personal lives to be by far the most interesting. Quick test. Tell me which of the following is more interesting. Example number 1. Diddy Kong Racing is a great racing game that's ideally played in multiplayer mode. Or, example number 2, back in the day my cousin and I were spending the night at our grandparents' house, so we thought we'd spice it up with some Diddy Kong Racing and an entire box of Airheads that we snuck in. We're talking 72 bars here, folks. Door locked and jacked up on sugar, we played all through the night, having an absolute blast, laughing our heads off, and when our grandparents knocked on the door to ask what all the brouhaha was about, we just said we were watching Everybody Loves Raymond, which to them was a more than sufficient explanation. Has anybody else had that exact same experience with Diddy Kong Racing? Maybe or maybe not, but either way, that game will always have special meaning to me. What I think is kind of fun is that how a game ends up having personal meaning for you can happen in a variety of ways. It's almost always a case of a game being in the right place at the right time, and while being in the right place at the right time can be unpredictable, sometimes it's very predictable. You want to talk about being in the right place at the right time, talk about the bananas in my kitchen at any given hour. They've figured it out and know what's coming. When it comes to games, perhaps one of the best examples would be games you received as a gift. Your birthday was that one day of the year with a big old bullseye right on it, and you often had high hopes. And talk about games getting personal, these are games that you received from another person, likely somebody you're close to, and how could it get more personal than that? In many cases, it was from your parents when you were an impressionable kid, but it could have come from anyone. I mean, if somebody wanted to give us games, we weren't going to be saying no. One of the games I received as a gift that I remember very fondly is Donkey Kong Land 3. Now, on the surface, this might have some of you scratching your heads a bit. I mean, most people would say the Super Nintendo iterations are much better, and even amongst the Game Boy games, a lot of people say the second one is the best. So, why is it a big deal for me? Well, it was a long time before I got my own Game Boy, and a long time before I stopped asking other people for a turn on theirs, despite them always saying no. So, by the time I finally got my own in 1997, my excitement and anticipation was at a fever pitch. I get crazy in the eyes just thinking back to how it felt. For my birthday, my mom allowed me to pick out my own Game Boy as well as one game for it. So, I picked Donkey Kong Land 3 since it was a series I was familiar with. While not the best in the series, it still had everything that makes the games good. I could bounce around on enemies, collect bananas, and shoot out of barrels. It was all here, and best of all, it was mine. Of course I loved it. It's almost not even fair with circumstances like that surrounding it, and the possibility of sharing it wasn't much of an option because everybody already had a Game Boy by that point, except for my cousin, who I was more than glad to share it with, and I remember playing that game with my cousin all through the summer. In fact, now's probably a good time to mention that who you're playing games with can certainly make them personal as well. Video games aren't just something that somebody does alone in their room, it can be a bonding activity. Some of the best times we've ever had playing video games were with other people, probably in the same room, allowing for some good bonding time, not only with whoever you're playing with, but the game itself. I mean, say what you want about how a game like GoldenEye aged, but there were some rip-roaring good times had with that game in 4-player mode. But while situations like that are pretty ideal sounding, sometimes it can be something sort of unusual that makes you develop a personal attachment. If you'll allow me to keep talking about the Game Boy, thank you very much, I have another story to share. During the long stretch of time where I didn't own a Game Boy and nobody ever let me play theirs, there was still some entertainment to be had, and it came in the form of a play session at a house full of kids that I barely even knew. Why was I even invited? I don't know, and apparently none of the other kids there did either. Well, seeing as I was basically an afterthought, I was relegated to the role of observer, and part of what I was observing was a kid across the room playing a Game Boy. Here we go again. And as expected, this kid was showing absolutely no signs of sharing it, but his brother didn't feel the same way and repeatedly asked for a turn on the Game Boy. Well, the brother asking wasn't taking no for an answer, and so the brother playing thought maybe he'll take me slamming this Game Boy into the side of his head for an answer. And wouldn't you believe it? The brother did. No more asking to use the Game Boy. So was this my chance to ask for a turn? Nope, it was my chance to call my mom and ask her to get me out of that place. But what I always remember about that story, besides a kid getting rocked in the head by a Game Boy, is that that particular Game Boy was a green Game Boy. The only time I ever remember seeing one that was anything other than the standard gray we all know and love. And thus, I am a fan of that green Game Boy to this day. Sure, a Game Boy isn't a game itself, but it's video games nonetheless. Another really common way that a game can become personally meaningful is by playing it a lot. It's kind of hard to not become attached in some way to a game if you've put a ton of time into it. I mean, my gosh, some of these games can have so much time put into them, they're gonna start expecting to be invited to family dinners. But even if you don't put a lot of time into a game, you may still develop fond memories of it from doing something significant in the game. Like, I don't know, maybe beating it? No, not like that. But if a kid beat a game like Battletoads, then that game would probably mean something to them. Or maybe a game is special for you because you got an amazing deal on it. Everybody likes a good deal, and having a little extra cash riding hot in your pocket might be just enough to put your excitement for the game over the top. But whatever the reason may be for why a game is personally meaningful to you, in pretty much every case it's because the game is associated with a certain time of your life. Whether it be during a summer where you had the opportunity to do lots of game hunting at garage sales, birthday parties as a kid, or during one of your favorite childhood summers. These games came at a time when having these games made life feel better. By playing or simply owning these games nowadays, we can keep some of those good vibes alive. That's kind of the idea of retro gaming in general, really. Hey, this good stuff from the past? Yeah, let's keep that around. And so we do. But with all of that said, I of course want to hear what some of these personal games for all of you are, as well as whatever stories you may have that go with them. And if you don't feel like sharing, you can always enjoy reading what other people said. I sure will be. But with that, leave your stories or whatever else you may want to say, and I will see ya in the next video.
He's the retro bird, yeah, and he's talking about video games.